Hey guys, it's Jim Next. Thanks for joining. And this was a Luminar Live event that was going to be hosted on Facebook. And for a couple of reasons, instead I'm recording it and I'll be sharing it here. So thanks for tuning in. Apologize for not being able to do it live, but here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. The Luminar Live today is 3 different photos that were submitted by readers, and I'm going to go through and edit those and just share some workflow tips and ideas as I do that. So this first photo is the moon rising over the city of Cleveland, and it was taken by Ron Skinner. So Ron, thanks for submitting this. I appreciate it. I'll walk through a couple of edits here and talk about what I'm doing as I do it. So the first thing I would do with this photo is I'd go into the Tools menu and crop. And one of the things I notice is it's slightly crooked, and I do that all the time. So Ron, I'm not picking on you. I just wanted to straighten this up a little bit. So I think something like that looks really good. And then I also want to apply a crop, and I'm going with the 16:9 ratio because it's kind of a cinematic crop, and I just like the way it looks. I think it really does a good job of sort of allowing you to really focus your subject. And so I think something about like that looks good. So I'll hit done, and there we go. And now the fun part starts, which is adding filters. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a few filters here, and then I will walk through kind of what I'm doing with them and why, and hopefully share some helpful tips along the way. So let me see. Let me start with those. Accent AI, it's just incredible. As you probably know, if you've got Luminar, then you already know how powerful it is. But I'm using it here just to brighten the image a little bit. I think it was a little bit too dark. You can see the before and after. And I love that moon. I mean, it looks like it was shot with a telephoto, really lengthy zoom lens, and with the compression, makes it looks like the moon is right there behind the city. So very cool shot, by the way, Ron. Okay, so in tone, I'm just going to bump up the contrast a bit. I'd say something about like that, which really just kind of darkened my photo. So I'm going to apply some smart tone, about that much, to bring it back a little bit. And if you're not familiar with smart tone, it's basically, as the name implies, it's intelligent. It's kind of like AI, but it lifts the tones and it'll bring up the shadows without messing up the highlights. So I love it. Next, I'm going to go to cross-processing, and this is kind of one of those filters where you just never really know what you're going to get. I mean, each of them has a specific look, but whenever I decide I want to do something different, I go to cross-processing, and I usually just have to click through the different options here. They're all named after cities around the globe, but having done this already, of course, I'm going to choose Monterey. And so if you look at the before and after, you can see it added a little bit of a pinkish purple glow, a little bit around the horizon, and of course around the moon. So I like that. It really helps bring up the sort of the intensity of that moon light, which I like. Next is going to be golden hour, which is going to do a little bit of the same, something about like that. And all I'm doing is just taking the kind of those warmer tones and making them pop a little bit more. And it's simply just because I kind of like the dramatic look. So that's where we are so far. Okay, now I'm going to add a couple more filters. I'm going to get the Orden effect. I'm going to get structure, which is up here at the top. And I'm going to get HSL. And I think that'll about do it. So let me close that, hit the X, there we go. Okay, so Orden is, I just love Orden. It's a really kind of dreamy kind of look. I'm going to go ahead and move this up. It is kind of darkening the image, but that's okay. I think all that is pretty good. So let me show you the before and the after. Just kind of adds a little bit of dreaminess to it, which I think works well when you got a moon. Now the next thing I'm going to do is going to be counterintuitive, perhaps. And basically I'm going to take this structure, and most people take structure and they go like this, and what it does is it creates kind of the appearance of a lot of detail, right? It sort of increases perceived detail. But I don't want to do that. I don't really want a lot of detail in my version of Ron's photo here, so I'm going to go that way. And as you can see, it gets really kind of muddled and soft and kind of dreamy. And so I'm going to also take the softness all the way down, and then I'm going to take boost, and I'm going to go all the way that way to the right. And so as you look at it, you can see that it's basically created a blur across the entire photo. So of course, I don't want the photo to be entirely blurry, so I'm going to get the brush. And in this case, I'm going to get the erase tool, and I'm just going to erase this adjustment from the skyline itself, because all I really want to do is just apply that adjustment into the sky and the water. But because the skyline itself is a smaller component of the photo, for me it's kind of quicker just to kind of erase it from the skyline than it is to paint all the way around the skyline. And I'm doing this kind of rough, obviously. I do that all the time when I'm live and on my own videos, I'm just kind of moving fast. You can always check your mask, and you can see I missed a little bit here and there, but you know, I think you get the point. So in these cases, I'm not really worried about being exactly precise, but once you're happy with it, just say done. And basically all I did is I created a bunch of blur in the photo, and then I erased it from the buildings so that I could have the buildings be pretty much in focus. There's the before and the after. So you can see the sky gets a lot softer, and so does the water. It's kind of adding to that dreamy effect that I was going for. And now really just the last step here is that the blue is a little too saturated. So I'm going to take the saturation down, and I'm also going to drop the luminance a little bit just to darken that blue slightly. Just something minor like that. There's a before. And if you look at the before, by the way, it's kind of an electric blue. It's a little too blue for me. Some of that came from the cross-processing and also just the contrast adjustments and the fact that it was just a blue kind of evening. So obviously kind of a blue hour sort of look, but I wanted to tone down the blue. And that's really what the HSL does for me, allowing me to isolate the saturation and the luminance both for just the blue color. So the split screen before and after, you can see before and after. Now I did erase basically a lot of the detail around the moon. That was a conscious choice, but of course you could undo that if you didn't do all the negative structure. You could erase that from the moon area as well, but that's the before after, and here's the full before and after. Just a fun, quick edit, and thanks Ron for submitting that. I think it's a gorgeous photo, and I personally like the town of Cleveland a lot. I used to live in Ohio many years ago, and I used to go to Cleveland a lot. So cool shot of a great town. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to grab the next photo, and I'll be right back. Okay, folks, thanks for hanging out for a minute. The next photo is the pier called Scripps Pier in San Diego, California, taken by our very own Laurie Rubin. So a very cool shot, Laurie. And hey, guess what, guys? The sun rays are real. I see all the messages in the Facebook group about people saying, all right, you're kind of overdoing the sun rays. And I think, you know, once you get it, you have to try it. It's kind of a requirement because it's just so fun and different. And I obviously went through my initial phase of, oh my God, sun rays. But these are real, and they were captured by Laurie with their camera. So really cool shot. What I'm going for here is kind of a dreamy sort of sunset look. And so I'm just going to go through and grab a bunch of filters that I love and that I use a lot and see if I can make something out of this. And, you know, to be clear on all of these, not just this photo, but, you know, when I'm editing someone else's photo, I'm just kind of doing stuff that I would probably do or something that I like, but it's not necessarily something that I would expect anyone to do, or, you know, like I'm not saying it's the right way to do things. I'm just saying it's a way to do things, and I'm looking for color balance. There it is. But it's the way I would do it in this case to create sort of this artistic looking sunset view. So very cool capture, and I'm going to sort of jack it up a little bit and have fun. So thanks for submitting it, Laurie. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and start with AI because it's kind of the greatest filter ever. It does make a big impact on the photo, as you can see. Here's the before and the after. It really does help you manage the light, which I'm a big fan of. Adjustable gradient allows you to set the orientation between top and bottom. And basically, I think I'm just going to leave it in the middle. Let me see here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the vibrance of the top, and I'm going to increase it pretty significantly. In fact, I am going to move the orientation a little bit, something more like that. And then click Set Orientation again. Otherwise, that line is going to stay in your photo. But I'm going to go ahead and lift the vibrance on the top and take the warmth down a little bit, something about like that. I'm just a fan of having kind of the orange and the blue in the sky if you can get it. And you can't always get it. You don't always capture it. You know, sometimes it's a little duller, but there's some blue and orange there. So I'm just kind of bringing that back. And now I'm going to go to the bottom section, and I'm going to bump the vibrance here as well, and also drop the warmth a little bit. So something about like that. I basically made them more vibrant, but cooled them off. But I'm not going for an entirely blue look, as you'll see, and as you can probably tell, because I've got the golden hour filter, which, you know, sort of by name alone will tell you that I'm not going for just a pure blue sort of look. So tone, here we go, one of my favorite filters. I'm going to bump up the contrast. I'm going to lift Smart Tone a little bit. I'm next going to drop the highlights a pretty good amount because you know, they are kind of blown out a little bit, which happens a lot in single exposures. I'm also going to drop the whites a pretty good ways. And so I'm just kind of reclaiming the sky, for lack of a better word. Let me show you the before and the after. And, you know, even though that's a contrast adjustment and some highlights and stuff, it does impact the color, as you can see, the before and the after. So whenever I'm making the light adjustments, especially with contrast, I pay close attention to color because it does impact it. Okay, so here's where I go have fun with some golden hour, and boom, I mean, it just really pops the color there and the brightness. I love how Laurie captured the sun coming out over here. Not rays, of course, because they're sort of stuck coming out over here and there, which is cool, but I love how the color up here is part of the frame too, so very cool. HSL is my next one, and I'm going to do something similar that I did last time, and that is I'm going to take the blues down. I'm going to start with aqua because I'm getting a little too much of that aqua color in the ocean and a little too much blue in the entire photo. So those are going to come down, and then the luminance of the aqua is going to come down. No, I'm sorry. It's going to come up so I can brighten that a little bit. So let me see the before and the after. Just kind of some light color shifts, I guess, for lack of a better word. Okay, dodge and burn. I'm sure you know this one, and hopefully if you have Luminar, you've been using it, and if not, I'm sure you'll find yourself using it a lot. I know that I am. I'm going to shrink my mouse a little bit, and I'm going to drop the strength pretty low, and I'm just going to, maybe a little bit bigger. I'm just going to move this around over here a little bit. I'm just trying to create a little bit more exposure here along these waves and these white caps, just to create a little bit more interest and visibility of that. So probably not the cleanest job, but now we got a little bit more white on the white caps, which I think looks cool. There's the before and the after. So maybe a little bit too intense, but that's okay. You can also take the amount down, right? So I might do that. I might say, well, let me go like, you know, let's say 75 instead of 100. So there's the before, there's the after at 75. I think that looks cool. Okay, soft focus. I love this filter. It really does do a good job of creating soft focus, as it says. I'm going to go pretty high on that, but as you can see, it creates a lot of brightness, which I don't want the photo to be too bright, so I'm going to drop that. And so if you remember, I said I'm going for kind of a dreamy look, and this helps to really bring it up. There's the before and the after. You can see the clouds got a lot softer, and there's a little bit of dreamy quality added to the water as well, so I like that quite a bit. Let's see here. Okay, Orden is next, and I'm going to stick with type 1, and I'm going to go about halfway on the amount. And the brightness, I'm going to leave, no, maybe just a little bit like that. Let's see, saturation, I might give it a little bump. And let's see here, contrast. Yeah, how about some contrast? Oh, we've got some, but I'll give it a tiny bit more. So I think that looks pretty cool. Let me see, there's the before. There's the after. Again, kind of a dreamy look, but hopefully you're having fun here. Now, split color warmth. I love this filter. It's great for adjusting the temperature basically for the warm colors or the cool colors separately. In this case, I want to bump up the warm colors, but I only want to do it on that sunburst. And so I'm just going to come over here and just paint that burst of color right there because I just want that to really pop. You can see my mask. If I could click the button, there you go. And I'm going to say done. And so split color warmth, I took the warm colors, made them warmer. So really I just took the sun rays there from that to that. It just gave them a bit more intensity, kind of like it's really shining down from the heavens, which is kind of a fun look. So I think that's looking pretty good. All I got left is color balance. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with the highlights, and I'm going to take this one a little bit to the right, something about like that. As I told you, I'm creating more of a sunset kind of look, and this is going to help me with managing the colors. And in the midtones, I want to get away from the green in the midtones and go a little bit more towards that magenta color. So, you know, maybe something like that. And let me show you the before and the after. So I think that's really about all that I would do. I would come back and maybe adjust the contrast a little bit more. Maybe take the exposure down a tiny bit. Whoops. Down a little bit, yeah, like that. Helps create a little bit more shadow and a little bit more dreaminess, but that's effectively the look I was going for because, as I said, I just wanted to create a dreamy sunset view of this photo or version of this photo. So let me show you the before and after. Very different, right? much more colorful, because obviously that's a single image, unedited, that came over from Laurie. But there's your before and there's your after. Again, a little bit saturated, maybe a bit saturated, depending on your taste. But I was going for that look. Whenever I'm kind of going for dreamy, I like the rich colors of kind of that dreamy look, and I like the shadow and the contrast and kind of the soft focus. I like putting all those kind of things together because I think it really does help create sort of that dreamy look. And then the golden hour, of course, had that little pop of color right there with the sun rays. So let me show you one more time. There's before, and there's the after. And that's really about it. I love that the helicopter's in it. If for any reason you decided you didn't want the helicopter, you have an erase tool. You could just go grab that and erase it. But I think it's cool there, just passing by while this gorgeous sunset is happening. So that is that photo, my friends. I've got one more, so I'll be right back, and we'll get going on this. Just 1 minute. Okay, thanks for staying tuned in here. Now, this elephant shot was posted by Roger Danes. So thank you, Roger. I think it's a really cool photograph. I love checking out animals in the wild, although I never get to really see them because my travels don't really ever take me those kind of places. And so that's one of the reasons I selected this photo. I like the photo, but I also like the fact that it gives me the opportunity to edit something that I would otherwise never really get to edit. So the first thing I would do with this, however, is apply a little bit of a crop. So I don't really care too much about that dirt that's down below the elephant's foot. And I'm not too concerned about what happens kind of on that right-hand side of the frame. I want to sort of compress that right side of the frame so that I have a little bit more room for him to look like he's walking into on the left side of the frame. And so that's what the crop is doing for me. It's just getting rid of a little bit of that dirt in the front and getting rid of some of what I consider sort of that empty space on the right-hand side, because I don't really want the elephant centered. I want to look like he's got some room to move into the photo. And so that's why I cropped it that way. But let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm going to start with converting this to black and white and then adding some tone. So the first thing on black and white I usually do is just have a look at it and say, does it look good in black and white or not? And I think it does. I think wildlife photos in black and white just look timeless. And so were it not for this building here, this could be something taken, 100 years ago, or, one of those kind of early explorers in Asia finds this rare animal, that sort of thing. So what I would do is take the highlights down because they're fairly prominent. So I just want to bring those down a bit just to try to get that under control. With tone, I'm going to add a little contrast. So something about like that. And I think I'm going to bump up smart tone so that I don't create too much shadow around the elephant. So let me show you the before and the after. It's created a little bit starker, a little bit more high contrast look, but that's okay. We're going to do a lot of things to this photo. So the next thing I'm going to do is go get a texture. So I'm going to add a new image layer, and I've got this weathered cement texture. And if you notice, the texture actually comes in the orientation. That's the word I'm looking for, of the photo that I have here, even though it was actually captured in landscape format. It came in portrait. So here we go. I'm dropping the opacity to about 40% because otherwise I can't really see it. And I like having the see-through ability so that I can figure out what my edits are going to be. So there's before, there's after. I would come over here and maybe slightly erase a little bit of this around the elephant's head. I'm going to drop the opacity. I don't want these things to be too distracting, especially on his head and his face. So I take a little bit of that out, something like that, just kind of playing around. But the texture is still fairly prominent across the photo. And of course I could always come, not to increase it, I could always come in here and lower that a little bit as well. Now if you look at the photo, you can see the elephant does have a very big difference in skin between the top of his trunk and his head. So some of that is just that showing through, but I wanted to lessen the effect of the texture right there on that smooth, kind of darker part of his skin. Okay, so new adjustment layer, and here I'm going to go get some filters. So I'm going to get Accent AI, of course. I'm going to get Adjustable Gradient. I'm going to get Tone, and I'm going to get Dodge and Burn. Where is that? Right here. Okay, close the catalog. So Accent AI, and I'm going to jack this one up pretty far just because I think it works really well. I mean, just that alone, I think, made a huge impact on the photo from that to that. So I like how this is looking. with adjustable gradient, I'm going to drop the exposure in the top, and I'm not going to move the dividing line, the orientation. I'm just going to leave it in the middle of the photo. So I'm going to drop the exposure there, increase the contrast a bit, and I think that looks pretty good. And then on the bottom, I'm just going to increase the contrast, and I'm going to go pretty heavy here, so something like maybe that, right? So here's what that filter's done. There's the before and after. I like the tones. I think it's looking pretty cool, but we've got a ways to go still. So speaking of tones, I'm going to use the tone filter next, and I'm just doing a little bit of smart tone, just a tiny smidge, and dropping the highlights a little bit. Something, maybe like that. Again, I'm just trying to control the light, and I like that filter for it a lot. I think it does a good job. And now dodge and burn. In this case, I want to go darker, and I'm going to go about 20% or so. And I'm going to, let's see, there's 20. And I'm going to increase the size of my brush. And all I'm going to do is basically just paint this around some of the edges of the photo. I don't want to darken the elephant. I just want to go gently around some of these edges and darken that up a little bit. It's kind of like adding a vignette, but not exactly. So I'm just going to say done. And let's take a look at the dodge and burn, see if it made much of a difference. Yeah, there's before and there's after. So it helps, I think, create a little bit more focus on the animal, which is really what I wanted to do. But here's the thing. I'm going to stick a different blend mode on this layer. I'm going to change the blend mode to hard light, and boom, very different look. If you go back to normal, there's that, and hard light really just, as the name implies, creates a higher contrast, a harder kind of light, kind of like a spotlight shining on the elephant. Everything's really contrasty. So I think that looks pretty cool, and that's partly the look I'm going for. So I'm going to go get one more layer, and it's an adjustment layer, and I'm going to get a few filters. I'm going to get split toning, which I absolutely love. I'm going to get matte look. I'm going to get Orden, and I'm going to get fog. I'm getting all kind of stuff, and I'm going to get structure. I know where structure is. There we go. Okay, so this is my last group of filters for our friendly elephant here. Split toning. Okay, so what I want to do basically with split toning is create kind of a sepia look, and so I'm going to move this, I went too far, to about there, and saturation to, maybe 40 or something. I'm basically taking the highlights and making them a little bit warmer. And then for the shadows, I'm going to do something very similar, something like that, and about like, maybe about right there. So you can see the before and after. There's before and there's after. So we went from a traditional kind of black and white look with a texture to now kind of a sepia sort of look, but it's a little too strong. And so instead of adjusting the saturation sliders, I'm just going to take the amount down, something about like that. And so there's before and there's after. So if it's not obvious, and I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning of this edit on this elephant photo, but I'm going for kind of a vintage sepia look where it would be something like you might see in a book of, here's a photo taken in 1922 of an explorer, kind of off in the jungles of Asia or whatever. So that's kind of the look I'm going for. And like I said, it's just fun editing other people's photos because it gives me not just new, different material, but in this case, subjects that I would frankly never get to shoot. So thanks again, Roger Daines. I appreciate it. Okay, matte look. I'm going to go up a little bit. So, mid-20s or so, something like that. And I'm going to take the fade up a bit because I do want to create kind of that faded look. Let's see here. A little more contrast I think is okay here. I think something like that. And I'm going to take the vividness down a little more because I definitely don't want very vivid colors here. I'm just kind of going for a soft kind of faded look. So next up is Orden. I'm going to stick with type 1. I'm going to go about midway on the amount, so maybe something like that. And then I'm going to take, let's see, softness. I'm going to go up pretty high, so maybe around 70. Just kind of soften that up a little bit. And I think contrast at 15 is fine. So there's the before, there's the after, just a little bit softer look, for lack of a better word. And I'm going to add a little bit of fog, just a touch. I'm trying to create that faded vintage look, and I think that fog does a good job there. You can see, a bit more visible detail, like in the elephant's skin and even in the background. And now it's just a little softer, a little more faded. So a gentle application of the fog filter actually helps create that faded look, which is kind of fun to do. And then with structure, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the previous photo, and that is I'm going to go all the way negative with these and all the way to the right with boost, just to create a very blurred photo. And then I'm just going to brush it into the background like I did before, because I don't want to lose all the details on the elephant. He's the star of the show here. Right bracket key will increase. Make sure you're on paint. And opacity 64. I actually think I'll leave it there. But I'm going to go over some of this and just kind of do that. And you can see the mask. Not a full opacity mask because I don't want one. But something like that. Leaving the elephant mostly in focus. And there you go. That's really what I would do to this photo, or at least today, because honestly, I'll sometimes go back and edit my own photos differently a day later or a week later. But if you take a look at the photo, taken, today kind of, and taken 50 or 100 years ago, right? So a vast difference in the before and after. There's the before, there's the after. So I think with, the texture and the different filters like the fog and the negative structure, obviously the texture as well, the matte look and some of those things, you can really create a lot of different and unique looks in Luminar. And that's what I was going for here, something that could have theoretically been taken, 100 years ago kind of thing. And I think I achieved it. It's not really my style, but that's part of the fun of editing someone else's photo, is you don't approach it with your own sort of biases, for lack of a better word, because you didn't take it, you don't have any connection to the photo other than just as a viewer. And so if you haven't done this, if you're in a photo club or something, maybe do that. Maybe trade photos with some of your friends and edit them. You never know what kind of way you'll get inspired. This has certainly inspired me, looking at these other people's photos and doing their edits on them. It's inspired me to try some new things in my own work. So it's a lot of fun. And once again, sorry we couldn't go live today, but hopefully you're able to catch this video. And that's it, my friends. That is the last photo of the 3. So one more time, there's the before and the after. And that is our Luminar Live for today. 3 different photos supplied by readers. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And thanks to the 3 of you that submitted photos. And that's a wrap. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.